So this person, Mr. Jeffrey Watson, which I think is a very serious person, and he's very well aware of the government's business and the corruption and the rest of it, has written a very interesting article in the Sydney Morning Herald, which I'm going to read. So Mr. Watson says a government is being privatized by stealth. PwC scandal shows how. The PwC scandal is serious, but it seems to have been lost in the background noise of a coronation and a federal budget. Yet the scandal raises some very big questions about how we are being governed. The background facts are simple enough. In 2013, Australia was engaged in an international effort to crack down on multinationals avoiding corporate tax through cross-border income and asset transfers. Specialists from PwC were brought in as consultants and given access to highly secret materials subject to confidentiality agreements. So in 2013, I think the Treasurer of Australia was someone called Joe Hawkey. And so the question that we need to ask Joe Hawkey is why on earth he decided to ask PwC, who has always, who perhaps have been trying to help these exact same corporations avoid tax, to advise Australia on how to avoid, how to prevent them to avoid tax, if that makes sense. It's like bringing Al Qaeda legal team to advise the US government on how to make US Homeland Security stronger, right? It just it's strange to say the least. Okay, PwC's top international tax partner Peter Collins took the information and shared it widely inside the firm. It was then sold to the targets of the crackdown, teaching them how to sidestep the same anti-avoidance measures PwC was helping to draft. Obviously, so PwC partner, Mr. Peter Collins, who was giving advice to the government, took the same exact advice to their private customers, clients, and advised them how to basically sidestep those measures. Of course, I think one wouldn't expect it to unfold any other way. So this is exactly what happened that one would expect to happen. The misuse of the highly confidential material was given a name reflecting the targeted market, Project North America. PwC probably made many millions of dollars. Disgraceful conduct, but highly lucrative for the partners at PwC. So, how do we know about this? Well, we did not hear it from PwC. In fact, PwC was obstructive. When the Australian Taxation Office sought information, PwC declined to cooperate, claiming legal professional privilege, a tactic commonly deployed by those clients of PwC. So when we asked the PwC, excuse me, sir, did you sell those information that you were not supposed to sell to people that you were not supposed to sell to? And then PwC answered, no, we are good guys. This is due to legal professional privilege. We can't disclose, but trust us, we're good guys. We'd never do anything wrong, of course not. Instead, we only know about this from the outstanding work of two journalists at the Australian Financial Review, digging into the reasons why the Tax Practitioners Board was resisting the re-registration of Peter Collins as a tax agent. If not for them, this sorry tale would not have come to light. As usual, there seem to have been few adverse consequences for those involved and those who benefited. So people who were involved and benefited from this scheme didn't have to. They had to face a few adverse consequences, is what Mr. Watson saying. And other than the millions of dollars that perhaps PwC earned selling this information, we also need to look into how much damage, how much revenue Australia lost as a result of these multinationals exactly know how to dodge tax system in Australia. So that's what is going to be very interesting. Collins and the chief executive of WPC, Tom Seymour, have left PwC, but we don't know upon what terms. They may have received handsome payouts. They were not fired, they just quit. And maybe they got a lot of money on the way out. We don't know how much money PwC made from its project North America because the partners won't say. And they have not made an offer to disgorge their wrongful profits. PwC has not told us to whom they sold the information, so we have no idea how much tax has been avoided. PwC has announced that it will commission an integral inquiry, but that is obviously insufficient. Okay, but this is much more than a story about misconduct by a Commonwealth contractor. It is far darker than just that. There are many questions, all unanswered. The first question: why on earth was PwC a substantial contributor to the global problem of cross-border tax examination, involved in designing Australia's response to that very problem? So PwC has been part of the problem, according to what Mr. Watson says. They have been helping corporations, multinationals, to avoid paying a fair amount of tax. But we asked them to help us solve the exact same problem. Anyone could see this was going to be a problem. That raises a second and even larger question. Why is Australia outsourcing so much of its governing to private enterprise? Policy development and implementation are now routinely taken from the public service and turned over to private consultants. It's such a shame. So instead of having government officials who have the best interest of the public working in the government, we are outsourcing these functions to private companies whose main objective, by definition, is making profits for their employers, private employers. So there is a big fundamental philosophical problem with asking people who have signed up an employment contract to help them make profit, to then help making good policies for Australian public. I don't think their contract with their employers and their contract with the government is very compatible. Policy development and implementation are now routinely taken from public service and turned over to private consultants. Some will say this is necessary because the most highly skilled and experienced people are in the private sector, and you know that this is probably true. But it is only true because the private firms have poached the most skilled and experienced public servants from the public service. This makes good economic sense for the big firms who can then charge out those services back to the Commonwealth at high rates. So basically what's happening is that we used to have good public servants that really served people very well. But what happened is that those people have been headhunted by private companies, and as a result, the government can't really function. I'm not exaggerating. Look at the audit results recently published by the APS for 2021-22. The Commonwealth paid $21 billion for external labor, in other words, consultants, contractors, and labor hire contracts in a single year. Wow, $21 billion. Instead of spending that money hiring people and spending that money on them, they are just outsourced their functions to the tune of $21 billion in a single year. To give some perspective, that is roughly the same as the federal government spent on secondary education in that year. This spending was not made public. The coalition had boasted for massive cost savings through cuts and caps on public service employment without telling us the holes were filled by payments to private enterprise. Our government was being privatized by stealth. It may be a coincidence, but over the last decade, the major beneficiaries of mass privatization were donating heavily to both sides of political power, Labour and the coalition. PwC was one of the largest donors. It is another sad story of inadequate federal election funding laws and the pernicious role of big money in our election cycle. That's another pillars of Western democracy is that all of these big corporations donate massively to political parties, and then and usually they donate to both sides, so it doesn't matter who wins because they have both in their pocket. So when whoever wins, then it's time to return the favor. That's when they get all of these contracts back. So they get basically their investment that they made through donations during election time 1,000 times back in the form of contracts from government without enough oversight. Will Labour be better? I don't know. So far, the new government's response to this debacle has been strangely muted. Existing contracts with PwC must be placed under investigation. Of course, negotiations with PwC for further contracts must be frozen. There needs to be a deterrent. Heads must roll. We need our own inquiry. Surely we should not be outsourcing that to PwC. Oh, you're right. So PwC, in response to this scandal, is actually hiring someone, paying someone to do an investigation into what happened. And they're calling it an independent investigation. Even though they have hired that person, they're paying him. But for some reason, it's quote unquote independent investigation, which is another sad joke. We need to take a deeper look at the way in which we have been outsourcing government. It seems we have been going down the wrong path. It is time for change. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey Watson. I cannot agree more.